Aloha. With this video, I just wanted to finish a thought that I went on a tangent on in the last video, where I was talking about the relationships that we are conditioned largely to accept as like the evolutionary peak of this reality. When you talk about interracial relationships in particular, how this is used to hide the violence and the crimes of this establishment and amplify the ideas that are sold to the people as evolution, as a good thing for humanity. My question is, who decides what's good for humanity? Who's been deciding what's good for humanity? We can see who emphasize. I mean, you can go in many different ways for that question, but there's definitely a group of beings or consciousness that you can tie that question to very easily. The idea of evolution has been pushed by the university system, which has also pushed heliocentrism. What's also pushed the university system is the white supremacy mind control program. That has been pushed to push the idea of the so-called European intellect being the most evolved intellect of the entire human experience. In order to emphasize that, they had to glorify the information being pushed by the university system. So this is where you enter in the heliocentric deception, the monkey evolution deception, the theory of gravity, the Big Bang theory, the technologically focused human evolution experience, everything that's pushed by the so-called New World. So the industrial age was a good example of what's happening today, and that whole thing. It was like step 1 to today's step 10. Today's technological worshipping is just another version of the industrial age back then. Instead of worshipping giant machines after the war, now they're pushing this whole technology thing after the war on terrorism. So as soon as you've been beat down and suppressed for so much, you have to be fed something. So this is where these mind controls and doggy treats, mind controls of the system and doggy treats that make you love the system come into play. One of the things that I've been sharing is how relationships fit into this, and in particular, the New Age mentality, which I just wanted to expand upon this because this ties into it. The New Age consciousness is unaware or remains willfully ignorant to the implications of the white supremacy agenda. It remains in that space because even entertaining that storyline, even entertaining that information, is a threat to their love and light. Everything is awesome. Everything is, wonderful and great, and we need to just move on. That's one thing that I've been sharing in previous videos, is the mentality that's projected through the New Age community, which is this whole, everything was bad, now everything is good, so we should just move on. That's basically, that's the basic math of the New Age community. And you can see how that exists for an individual. Individuals used to be, fucked up, like bad, like something was wrong with them. Then they escaped to the New Age community. So they went from their old self to their new self. The same way the colonial consciousness went from its old self in the old world to its new self reinvented itself in the New World with Christopher Columbus and conquering of the lands and all that other stuff. This is the system it's the same story that was played back then, it's being played today. So in order to distract from the war and the crimes and the sickness and the disease back then, what did the system do? It didn't televise, or it didn't publicize the jacked up stuff that was going on with that empire. It only publicized what it appeared, how it appeared to be the superhero in all of those discussions, the superhero in all those interactions. So you don't hear about the conquistadors' relationship to the Catholic religion and so on and so forth, and how that still affects us today. You don't hear about that. You only hear about the beauty that has been brought and the connections that have been brought with the Bible and the modern religions at the expense of the indigenous peoples. So that's one example. Another example is the push nowadays is the push for, well, before I go any further, I wanted to emphasize the New Age mind control program that starts and stays in that space is on purpose. It's kind of like a subtle mind control that allows people to think they know what's going on, but still remain largely in the dark about the deeper storylines. So this is why the education system exists. They couldn't have people just thinking for themselves. You got to install a program that's going to steal 13 years of their life and 8 hours out of that day in their early childhood, thinking creative, childhood building block time frames. You got to take them out of that space and insert the program. So enter in preschool, elementary school, middle school, and high school. Those are not schools. Like this, that's protecting that. What does the word school come from? Scholasticism. So it's protecting the medieval so-called intellect. When you trace back school, you go back to scholar, scholasticism. Then you're talking about the so-called intelligence that came out of the medieval time frame. That's what scholasticism is. So this is no different from the mind controls of the medieval time frames. So, excuse me. Today's version of that manipulation is getting into the very relationships now. So like I've been saying in reference to the how and the why of, specifically the why of the white supremacy mind control program, one of the biggest whys is the recognition by the so-called white people who are behind the white supremacy program. And it's not just white people, it's everybody up in those upper echelon mind controls. But white people, so-called white people, do play a big role in that, especially nowadays, a big role in ignoring this information that connects all of these dots, pushing the new age agenda of everything is awesome, we need to just move on and get better, and everything is cool. Like, no. We're gonna have to look at some of this shit that, that's been going on. So-called white people don't want to look at that stuff. So in order to keep people from looking at that, one of the agendas that have to be pushed is this: we're all human, we're all one, we need to just unite. Don't ask any questions, don't think about anything, don't connect to your culture, don't connect to your ancestors, don't look at any kind of spiritual information that turns on from like your ancestral connections. Only pay attention to the extraterrestrial modern new age interpretations of intellect and information and technology and so on and so forth. So these are the two worlds. You can see that as a brain that's being kind of like cut in half. An entire community has been developed to create an atmosphere. What does that atmosphere look like? Well, before I go any further, let me emphasize even more so the nuts and bolts of one of the biggest nuts and bolts in the white supremacy agenda is the protecting of their genetic disposition, to put it lightly. And for people who don't understand this, if a so-called white person has a baby with a black person in any kind of way, the black genes will be dominant. So this is affected. This goes into the melanin. This is why melanin is such a deeply researched element in the so-called white educational system. Melanin, it's $370 per gram or something like that. It's way over what gold is. So this experience relating to who and what we are is very much connected and very much important to pay attention to. The system doesn't want you to do that, though. The system wants you to buy the story that's being sold. So anytime the race discussion comes up, your immediate response should be, according to them, get angry and get defensive, get reactionary, and push the human agenda. Boom. That's the majority of people today from this new age escapist mentality. The other side of that is just don't even pay it any attention. Don't pay it any mind. Like, ignore it. So if you're going to pay attention to it, get angry and emotional. If you think it's not even worth it, then you're just going to ignore it. So what happens is that discussion and that information never gets revealed. So now that most people are comfortable in the space of ignorance, now people feel ignorant once they start thinking. So in order to not feel ignorant, the system has to install artificial storylines to fill their gaps in their reality. So the gaps that get filled in our reality are these new age perspectives of reality, with this whole, like, we're all human, technology, we're all one race, so we should just, black man with white woman, interracial relationships are being pushed in by the mainstream media. So this is a thing you got to ask yourself, new agers and so on and so forth, like, what is the intention here? What is the purpose there? Well, if you are aware, if you've done your research about the white supremacy agenda, then you would know one of the biggest reasons why this stuff is being promoted. You think the system, the government, really gives a fuck about you? So if they're pushing all this stuff, then your next question is why? But people haven't done that internal work, that personal work. So they'll just push this stuff to the side. And then when in that act of pushing that stuff to the side, what are they doing? They are accepting. It's not that they're like, the biggest thing that happens when these storylines get pushed to the side is that there's a certain comfort level that happens with the relationship that the individual has to the government. There's a certain kind of trust and connection and belief that the system is benevolent that comes when they believe in this new world, interracial relationship storyline. And so I have my own perspective on this whole thing, because I love my family and my connections, that whole thing, and I don't think that should be at all thrown away in any kind of way. In fact, we should be going to the depths of researching that from my own experience being so-called Mexican, so-called black, or the indigenous American here, like, having that exist has done nothing but help me be more comfortable and cool with myself. And, when I see a whole, hang up already. So when I see a whole, group of people, like, all over the world saying, you're wrong, you shouldn't be talking about this, you should be paying attention to this. We're from the Pleiadian galaxy, we're from star system, we're from Andromeda's, it's bigger than race. It's like, wait, you haven't even read that book. You haven't read the book called Racism or White Supremacy or The Story of Race. Most people who are big talkers against the race and racism and white supremacy discussion have never read any books or gone into the depths of what that means. They haven't done any research on that. So most people in response to this are speaking from their emotional, what they feel about it. No, people who have done this research are not talking. When I'm talking about racism, white supremacy, I'm not talking about my feelings. This is coming from researching this, from experiencing this my entire life. So people who are still getting their power from the system, who also ignores and goes against this information, they are only empowered by the system. So the same way people are getting their power from the heliocentrism, like the arrogance that comes from defending heliocentrism, they're getting their power from the government's fake power. The same thing's happening when people defend this racist, claiming to be not racist, new age agenda. They're getting their power from the ignorant power of the system not addressing this storyline. So their arrogance comes from the same space that the arrogance comes from people defending the heliocentric deception. So this is the people who are constantly building up their power cells, their confidence, their relationship to what's going on in this realm. Their power comes from the system that they claim to be against. So what you're looking at now, and you can look at this everywhere, all the movies, all the TV shows, all the Facebook advertisements, marketing, all this stuff, everything is pushing this interracial agenda. And like I said in previous videos, when I mention this, I'm talking about the macro. Micro storylines, the individual relationships, nobody has any, and it can say anything about that. People are going to do whatever they're going to do in their own house, in their own thing. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the macro consciousness, the macro storylines that get sold to us on the mass scale. Not the little like feelings and emotions that people get from just like, oh, what are you saying? We shouldn't. I'm a white woman. I can't date a black man. I'm a black man. I can't date a white woman. Da, 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 da. So, people get in their feelings about that. And then what ties this in even further is the whole sexuality thing ties in it. So that makes it more complex. So including the LGBT conversation into the interracial relationship, the same way that they include interracial dating relationship conversation. This is the same way they include LGBT and feminism in the so-called Black Power movement or the indigenous people around the world movement. It's to control the dialogue, to label it and bring it all down, and also maintain the power. So if they just ball you up into a protester ball of confusion and arrogance and angst, then they can control you and miss the actual talking points. This is why I make all these videos now, is because the majority of people who are talking about so-called truth and all this other stuff, they usually miss the biggest talking points. The only thing that's attractive on YouTube is the information that is missing the biggest talking points, because that is what's comfortable for people. What's uncomfortable for people is what gets views, is what gets likes. Or is what doesn't get views and what doesn't get likes. So what does get views and likes is the comfortable shit, like the Joe Rogan type of consciousness bullshit. So they will push that kind of mentality into the mainstream consciousness. That's the macro consciousness I'm talking about. That is a little bit different than the micro consciousness or relationships. So to make it clear, can anybody say anything about micro or individual relationships? Of course not. So whatever is going to happen in there is going to happen based upon their consciousness level and you know what they feel. Now that's a completely different world from the mind control system pushing a particular agenda, like interracial dating, like the LGBT community stuff, like the new world simulation theory, and all the other heliocentrism was another one that's pushed on the individual. So this is the thing. If heliocentrism was pushed, if technology was pushed, and interracial dating is now being pushed, what do you think is the difference there? Is there a difference? You know, why is it? So people don't ask that questions because they can't differentiate between their own personal attachments to the storyline. So they just, you know, accept it as, since they can't do that internal work, which is what is required to remove yourself from those personal attachments. Since they don't do that internal work, what do? They react and project onto you. Say you're wrong for even talking about, you know, interracial dating and all this other stuff. Like, no. You're just not understanding where I'm coming from because you don't have anywhere to put this information. You're still processing this perspectives from emotion. This ain't got nothing to do with your emotions. This has to do with an actual control grid that's existing and has been existing for centuries. Centuries, Kenya. So yeah, this is the modern family storyline. So this is another thing. Even the TV show Modern Family, you know, that's a mind control program. But this is the thing. In these storylines, in this information, obviously all the other agendas are being pushed with this, you know, disgusting ass system. But one of the main things that gets pushed that, you know, we fall from, we don't pay attention to is because we get distracted by, you know, the pedophilia and all that other stuff. But, you know, something that is pretty fucked up as well is this is the modern American family. The intention here, coming from an indigenous person's perspective, when you look at this, you don't see one indigenous person. Like, if you do, it's in this mixed race, mixed group thing. So this is that whole storyline that I was talking about modern humans who are vested completely in that new world, new age mentality, have to start their entire lives, their entire timeline at a particular point. So this is where Make America Great Again comes in. This is where Alex Jones's whole 1776 will commence again. That's what they're saying is the beginning of their reality. That's the beginning of their time. That's their glory of their empire. So they have to protect that. How they protect that is by getting that involved, getting that belief system ingrained within your own timeline, within your own definitions of yourself, with your connections to the land and so on and so forth. So this is why the American family or modern family type storyline has to be pushed by the system. So specifically in reference to the psychology, because this is what I wanted to focus on in reference to interracial relationships, that's how it's pushed on the macro scale. On a micro scale, we don't recognize, see, what people say is that, you know, black man, this is the thing that's pushed by the system to destroy the so-called black family, which inherently destroys the indigenous family, which inherently keeps the non-indigenous American family to be the most stable, the most connected, the most representative of this world. So as long as your family is destroyed, their family doesn't have to be great. Their family just has to be slightly better than your destroyed family. And then all you have to do is not talk about who destroyed that family and who's continuing to destroy that family. So this is where we are now. This is why the mainstream media and the education system exists in the first place, to maintain that ignorance, to maintain the empire. And this is done through the emotions and the relationships that you have on an everyday basis. So this connects to, like I was saying in the last video, we hear every day about the angry black man. Like anybody can give you a definition of what that means, but not many people have really looked at and faced the reality of the opposite of that. Loosely speaking, the opposite of the angry black man is the overly nice and concerned white man. See, that is also, that is actually a real threat to people. See, the angry black man, Kenya, come on. The angry black man is an invention. It's a straw man that has been invented to control so-called black people overall. See, the overly concerned, overly nice white man is not an invention. That's a reality that's connected directly to control grids, not only in the so-called New World, but across the world through the colonial agenda. That is the alchemy within the overly nice, overly concerned white man. See, this is why the angry black man was invented, to promote that. The same thing with the angry black woman. It's put in comedy, it's put in movies, it's put in cartoons, like the sassy black woman. That means that, you know, you're irrational. You're ignorant, you're dumb, you're emotional before you're intellectual. That's what that stuff means. So anytime they play that stereotypical black man, black woman shit, that's what they're saying. You're irrational, you're emotional, you're dumb, you're ignorant, and, you know, intelligence doesn't come first. You know, that comes from white people. You know, when you want to hear some rational thoughts, talk to a white man. And if you don't have a white man, talk to a white woman in a lab coat. You know, this is what's pumped out by the system. So it's not just that, you know, it's not just worship so-called white people. It's beat the shit out of and step down on not white people. These are the intricacies of this storyline, that, like, how much shit this is stuff that the so-called truther community plays like it doesn't matter and doesn't exist. Like, and that's what I'm saying. It's so dangerous to allow this stuff to continue to just float out there, because these are the mind control programs and systems that the system is going to use to sell you the next agenda. But since this worked, this is why this shit works so well. Since it's so involved inside your own persona, in your emotions, in your history, in your connection to the land, in your connections to resources, in your connections to your family. This is internal work. Since it's involved in your internal work, people think it's outside of themselves if they haven't done that internal work. You will only see this as being your responsibility until when you do this internal work. Until then, you won't see it. And in that not seeing it, you will attack other people who have seen it. You will attack them and try to discredit them simply because you are ignorant of where they're really coming from. So instead of addressing the psychology of interracial dating from a colonial, colonized, like gentrification perspective and that whole thing, you know, we get caught up in the, well, black women this and the black family this and that. And that's not to say that, you know, that doesn't exist in some kind of way in reaction to largely, but that's not the real issue here. The real issue is deeper than you know, black men just being attracted to white women. No, get psychologically. And does that mean, and that's accepted, and like I said, when that's accepted, what does that mean for black women? White women are better than black women. In what kind of way? Well, you won't go into that, because that's when you start getting deep. So this is how I'll get deep into that, just very briefly, in reference to the mind controls of it. So that's obvious as far as the relationship or the comparisons between white women and black women. There is no comparison. They're completely different beings in many different ways. But since there has been this, you know, we're all human, we're all men, we're all women, we're all one race, that whole thing, there's this comparison storyline that gets played. It doesn't work like that. There's a compatibility storyline that's getting ignored. There's a compatibility. It's not about, you know, what's likable and all this other stuff. There's compatibility, meanings, and purposes that gets ignored. So what the system wants to do when it promotes the white woman as the top tier relationship is that it says it's promoting your relationship to the system, because the white woman represents a relationship to the system when you are attracted on that level. See, black men aren't attracted to white women because they are better than black women, which is what subconsciously is being sold to the people who are still selling this primitive and savage, not white women and not white men, that old, indigenous, primitive, and savage. No, you got to get yourself a new world woman. That's what the white woman represents. That's the psychology of it. See, they won't talk about that though. They'll just say, oh, white women are just nicer and, you know, sweeter and care more about black people. No, black men. No, that's not what it is. What's the biggest part of it in that relationship is that white women, so-called white women, of course, obviously, so-called white women are not smarter and nicer and sweeter to black men in relationships. They are just worshipped and comfortable in the world that has been created around them as the pedestal. They live in a fairy tale world. They are the queens of the Disney queens. They're the Disney princesses of humanity. So in that subconscious Disney princess world, what happens? They generate this sort of confidence that comes out of where? Is it coming out of nothing? No, it comes out of being mind controlled. See, we get mind controlled to hate and destroy ourselves. But what's the opposite of that? Being mind controlled to love and cherish not yourself, but the idea of yourself. The same way in like self-destruction. You're not fucked up. You're conditioned to think you're fucked up. You're not amazing in this world, white woman. You're conditioned to think that you're amazing in this world. And as long as you keep getting that conditioning over and over and over again, look at all your supermodels, look at all your Miss Americas, look at all your Barbie, your cartoons, your Hollywood, your TV shows, your news anchors, your YouTubers, your gamers, like all this shit, porn, all this shit. Like look at the interracial shit in porn and that whole thing. You can get real deep in that, and that's just an extension of what I was talking about here. Like get you the top tier of this human experience. So that's the mind control program of interracial dating promoted by the system that doesn't really get acknowledged and doesn't really get paid attention. It doesn't get broken down, largely because the storyline that wants to get promoted by the system is the emotional reactionary storyline that involves you not even analyzing how so-called white women got to their attractive space. See, before we don't even get there. And largely a lot of people accept this whole, when they get into these discussions, they actually accept the thing when they're talking about like, well, you know, when black men say, well, you know, a white woman just treats me better. You know, there's a lot of black men out there that say this shit and they look for this. So what are they saying? Personally, on a micro scale, they're like, yeah, that's true. Let me white woman. But on the other side of that, what are they saying? Fuck black women. Black women are fucked up. They're angry. They're emotional. There's something wrong with them. So what are they doing when they saying fuck black women? They're saying fuck themselves. See, these are the storylines that fuck their mother, fuck their family, fuck their ancestors, fuck everything. And that's accepted. And then so-called white people also accept that. It's because they don't know how to think. They're willfully ignorant. They're only thinking what they are told to think. Everything that you see so-called white people are ignorant as people. Don't even have to be white. On the internet, defending this whole like mainstream mentalities, they're doing the same shit. They don't know how to think. The system has been thinking for them for their entire lives. The confidence that these so-called white people have from this system, it's been that they have in a daily basis. It comes from this system. Look at Alex Jones. How is he considered a leader in any kind of way if he's talking about something that is, non-existent? 1776? It's because the illusion, the fairy tale that people believe in is so rich, it's so real, he can generate that. And then Owen Benjamin can jump toward that too. That's how thick that mind control is. They can make an entire belief system, they can make an entire world that makes them the superheroes based upon illusions. So Owen Benjamin can tell you, people who are willfully ignorant, don't look at the infrastructure of white supremacy. Just fuck a lot of white women and have a lot of white babies. That's basically what he's saying. I'm white. I'm a white enthusiast. These are his words. I'm a white enthusiast. So he's not even going into what the terminology white is. He's, I'm a white enthusiast. I'm not a white, racist or supremacist. I'm a white enthusiast. What does that mean? What? Have him walk onto a Native American reservation and say, I'm a white enthusiast. Have him walk into East Oakland in a group where we're talking about our connections to the land and everything, and him say he's a white enthusiast. He can't. He can only say it in his little fenced in protective bubble. He's a fucking illusion. Everything that he's saying is stolen. He's watching videos. I know he's seen my videos. All the video. That dude's a super narcissistic maniac, egomaniac. I know he's watched at least one of my videos. Probably haven't even finished it because of the depths of where I was going. And most people can't even handle that shit. What they do is they take like your talking points and then they Europeanize them. They Caucasify them and then regurgitate them, and then it sounds like truth. And then they create this team of bears, and then they get a whole bunch of numbers of ignorant, illusory driven ass people, and then they say, oh look, we have the truth. And then it gets promoted by Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, and all those other people, and then there's another distraction. And like I said, what is this individual pushing? Willful ignorance. Never even going into the mind control programs of an individual accepting the term white enthusiast. But since that individual accepts that term and glorifies that term, what is he doing for all the thousands of people who are loving and cherishing his stuff? Kenya, come on. Kenya, please. I just wanted to emphasize this and focus mostly on the so-called interracial relationships, the black family, the white family too, the modern family, the American family. They just say the American family, like make America great again, in order to hide the indigenous American family. So did I emphasize what I wanted to emphasize with the whole interracial dating thing? So yeah, the main thing I wanted to emphasize was the psychology behind the interracial dating conversation. Not the shit within, not the micro scale, the macro scale. The macro scale. And like I said, the macro scale is always going to be first and foremost. The micro scale comes secondary. For some people who are, that's their own space, the micro comes first. That's fine. Do whatever it is you're going to do. But for the people who are listening to these videos and coming from where I'm coming from, you can't have a depth of relationship on a micro level if you haven't at first anchored yourself in the macro observations and interpretations of this reality. You can convince yourself to the umpteenth degree that you're living your best life, that whole thing, in the micro world. You can live ignorant for the rest of your life. But if you haven't at first gone into the macro scale and the macro relationship that you have with what's going on, how are you going to be able to interpret? How are you going to be able to interpret the fact that you're not in a micro mind control program? See, Kenya, please, I got to finish this. The macro is what allows you, is what helps you go into the depths of a micro connection. The macro, being involved and aware of the macro, is what keeps you from being trapped within micro mind controls. So the system doesn't want you to break down the macro mind controls, so it keeps you trapped within the micro mind controls. And that involves everything from your relationships to colonialism to gentrification to the education system. Everything is involved in that relationship. And the deepest ways that you are trapped in these mind controls, the macro mind controls, is when they put these mind controls in your relationships. So your sexual relationships, your reproductive relationships, your artistic relationships, your educational relationships, your entertaining relationships, your familial relationships, your experiential relationships. Like, all the relationships are all limited and all like constructed to have a particular effect that involves trapping you in the micro consciousness. That is the status quo of intellect. The status quo of consciousness is like, oh, you don't want to anything outside of the status quo of consciousness is fringe and conspiracy. So you can see how now people like Joe Rogan, Bill Nye, they exist to maintain the like the barriers of consciousness. You can't go any further than this. If you go any further than this thought, then you are a threat to the system. That's what Joe Rogan represents. Keeping you in the barriers or in the ring of control, the rings of control. So he's like a ref, keeping you, get off the ropes. Get off the ropes. Stay in the box. Stay in the arena. Stay in the ring. You're like, no, fuck. We're gonna address the whole system. Who the fuck made you the judge and the authority of this system? We're gonna stop fighting each other and look at what's going on and break this whole thing down. Sit your little funky ass down for a moment and quit trying to dictate this conversation, this interaction. That's where we're at right now. But people don't even want to get into that space because they're still loving the arena. They're still loving the referee. They're still loving the authority. They're still loving and cherishing this idea of human evolution. It's all bullshit. So until we get into that space, see, this is why I said I wanted to break this video down, is because a lot of people can't even get into these conversations because, a lot of these people who have thought about this information are they themselves. They never thought about, the mind controls of interracial relationships. Some people might be in an interracial relationship and they never really thought about it. But they just got involved in it without even breaking it down. Now people see like how a lot of even their relationships are tap into this shit. And, you can see the amount of fear that comes from not wanting to address that or talk about that. You could lose your partner. You could lose a part of yourself that would, end up in you losing your partner. And it's not a you losing your partner. It's you gaining a part of yourself. And I'll end it on that note. Let me say that again. Kenya. It's not about you losing your partner. Like when people start questioning the reality of this system, you're not losing a part of you're not losing the system. You're not losing anything. You're gaining a part of yourself. And that's the thing. People don't want to, that includes internal work. That includes change. See, people will avoid change and that internal work because they don't want to do the work. They'll avoid changing and expanding their consciousness because they don't want to do the work. What I'm saying is that once you start doing this work, it's a lot easier once you turn that motor on, once you turn that relationship on. But if you keep leaving it off, you will never be able to think for yourself. You're just going to be regurgitating what the system tells you to think about and tells you how to act in certain situations. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. In any kind of relationship, this is what I wanted to emphasize. You're not gaining, you're not losing anything. You're always going to be gaining something. You might not see it now, it might be difficult and painful now, but if something is there, you're really just rationalizing something that is eating you away. And this goes into the codependency program too, of like people being pushed to be in relationships. So when they're pushing interracial relationships, they're pushing a relationship with colonialism. They're pushing the relationship with the mind control system. See, the quicker you get into a relationship with a white woman, a white woman is not going to, largely, most of the time, and even beyond that, she's not going, like the difference between sympathy and empathy, she's not going to be able to go to the depths of what you're talking about based upon your experience. A so-called black woman or a not white woman has that anchor of experience that a so-called white woman has never lived with in her entire life. And that's something that's attractive to everybody, really. That's a stress that, you know, so-called white women were never stressed with. So they never have that in any kind of way. Compared to how we have it, they've been, you know, coddled by the system. And then now white women today are acting like, you know, that doesn't exist in many different ways. Look at the Barbie program. Look at Marilyn Monroe. Look at, you know, so this is comparable to, what is it? Elvis Presley. White women are the Elvis Presley of humanity. White women, so-called white women, are the Elvis Presley of humanity. Now tie this into the Lisa Marie Presley in relationship with Michael Jackson and that whole thing. So now you see what's going on now. Like this is, white women are the Elvis Presley. If people don't know what I'm talking about when I say that, Elvis Presley basically stole everything from so-called black people in the Americas, blues and rock and roll and all that, and they called him the king of rock and roll. He stole everything. Everything came from blues, everything came from so-called black people. But who was promoted in the whole world? And what happened to rock and roll overall? It was controlled. It wasn't that he was also promoted, it was that blues and our relationship and our expressions were controlled, were dominated by the status quo. It's the same thing that's happening right now, and it's happening in our relationships. Since every woman appears to be Elvis Presley to the majority of mind-controlled black men, that is a safety net for the colonial system. That's a control measure for the colonial system. And this is not to promote any kind of hate or anything, like I said, for anybody. Once you get into this space, you're not really subjected to your emotions. So it shouldn't be transferring over to a hatred of anybody. It should be transferring over or transmuting into something that is helping you grow. And not you know, helping you eat yourself away. If you're generating, you know, emotions based upon like anger and all that other stuff, then you got a problem. There's something you ain't looked in yet. I mean, it's normal to be angry at the system and all that other stuff, but if you're at this point now and you're still, you know, focusing on stuff from that perspective, then that's a personal issue. Because I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something deeper than that. But yeah, so anyway, the Elvis Presley of humanity, and like I said, it's not just that that individual gets promoted. It's the entire world of music that gets demonized and swept under the rug because now the focus has all been channeled to what? Elvis, the king of humanity. the king of rock and roll, the king of women, the queen of women. Who is that? The white woman. And what is white? See, that discussion isn't even made. Before you can even get into that discussion, what do? Oh, you're racist. Why don't you just, we're going to be all brown people anyway. What they're saying is that that's another escape mechanism too. We're all going to be mixed in a few years anyway. That's where humanity is moving towards. So instead of actually analyzing this experience, they want to answer everything. So this is the side effect of being put out there as the authority of everything, specifically the authority of intellect for hundreds and hundreds of years. So now when we have the discussion of race in the future, what do they say? Well, we're all going to be, brown. That's a safety net. That's an escape from realizing that, hey, that's a knee-jerk response to hiding the genetic program that exists inside the white supremacy program. So in order to hide the genetic protection program within the white supremacy agenda, now they have to say, well, we're all going to be brown in the future. We all should just mix and hurry up and all this other stuff. Wait a second. Let's analyze this first. No. We should just mix. You're racist. You're divisive. We're all one. Wait. Hold on a second. You're telling me that we're all beautifully mixed and put in these different places on purpose and have all this different music and art and all this other stuff. We're supposed to just let that die? Because evolution has now, blended a lot of us? Are we going to ignore the fact that colonialism has been a big part of this, blending and all that other bullshit? No, you're racist. All right, whatever. You see how that so-called intellect responds a lot of the times. They don't want to get to the heart of the issue. They don't really want to, they're not concerned with the information. They're not concerned with really getting to the information itself. It's all defense mechanisms. It's all reactionary. That's what I want to emphasize with these videos and challenge people to go to a deeper level, especially with this interracial relationship storyline that's out there that's really not getting to the heart of the issue. If you're talking about interracial dating and all that other stuff and you haven't mentioned like the Elvis complex and the Barbie complex that I've been talking about, you're still talking TMZ shit. That's TMZ truth. This ain't no TMZ, TRL, TYT bullshit. I don't know what's up with all these T's, but all that, you know what I'm saying? Like this ain't no fucking just regular ass trap information out there. This ain't a trap. You can think for yourself. See, these individuals who are pushing emotion, like Owen Benjamin, he's pushing that camaraderie, that bear camaraderie. They need that. They need that because that's the only thing that they have to hold on to is distraction. Distraction. See, the individuals who are in that bear community, they don't have any ability to think for themselves. They are in transition into a space of being able to think for themselves. So right now, in this transition, like a kid looks up to an older kid, that's basically what the bear crew is. It's people who are in line to research and transmute a lot of this information. But they're they haven't done the internal work. They've just been presented to it by social media. So that's as far as it goes. And that's where the system wants to keep people. So they need representatives out there to maintain that space. Owen Benjamin's one of them. Joe Rogan's another one of them. Alex Jones is another one. All the people that these individuals interview, they're representatives of that too. It's stagnant consciousness at best, to put it like lightly. Stagnant. it's the appearance of being well informed and knowledgeable, but your information maxes out at the illusory universes. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for the support. And until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.